In this chapter, we will take a closer look at the nature of terrorism. While there are many definitions of terrorism, they all have certain common denominators. First of all, terrorism is a criminal activity. It is important to understand this. Terrorist activity is not an acceptable and normal manner in which to make one's views heard. Secondly, terrorism involves violence against civilians, people like you and me and our families. Thirdly, a terrorist has his or her aim to push a social, religious, or political objective. The goal of the terrorist is to force a government or group of people to change. The next menu selection, The Nature of Terrorism, will give you an introduction to the nature, methods, and purposes of terrorism.
I think what we're doing is very important. That September the 11th has changed the lives of everyone, particularly us in law enforcement. When this first happened, everybody was shocked, they were scared, they were angry, and then confused. And I think today, this entire country is all for those things. And I think what we in law enforcement have to understand is that this is not the destruction of a store. This is a war against the United States of America. And we in law enforcement are going to be the first responders.
We have to realize that terrorism works, and terrorism is easy. It's inexpensive. It's cheap. It has huge lasting effects on society.
I think in law enforcement until 9/11, we were fairly naive about terrorism. It was radical groups it was internal terrorism, and it was always something that happened overseas. It was something that happened in Middle Asia or in the Middle East. It was things that we looked at and always said may come here, but we never looked at it at a local level. I think 9/11's brought home the fact that it will happen, and it can happen at a local level. These cells are living within our community, they live within our community at large, and they can be anywhere in the state of California. So law enforcement officers have to realize that these people are amongst us now.
In past incidents, there have been many patterns and indicators prior to the incident actually occurring. Officers nowadays have to be able to better respond to and recognize those indicators and those actions prior to the incident, so hopefully we can interdict that incident before it actually occurs.
You might have 10,000 things happen, and only one of those could lead to a terrorist incident, but if we're not aware, and if we don't look for things that could possibly cause it, then we're kind of missing the boat, because terrorism is our newest, biggest realized crime and threat.
The purpose of terrorism. There is almost always a strategy behind terrorist actions. Whether it takes the form of bombings, shootings, hijackings, or assassinations, terrorism is neither random, spontaneous, nor blind. It is a deliberate use of violence against civilians for political or religious ends. Even though most people can recognize terrorism when they see it, experts have had difficulty coming up with an ironclad definition. The State Department defines terrorism as premeditated, politically motivated violence perpetrated against non-combatant targets by subnational groups or clandestine agents, usually intended to influence an audience.
There are plenty of specific definitions, stock definitions from the FBI and other agencies. I prefer a simple one. Terrorism is the use of violence, the threat of violence, to induce fear, and that fear is meant to coerce a change in policies, in government, for political, social, or religious reasons. That change may be to change policies, as I said. It may be simply to remove a government. It may be to stop a practice. For political reasons, to change a government, from a democratic government to a socialist government or any other kind, from a secular government to a religious government.
The point is to use the psychological impact of violence or the threat of violence to effect political change.
As we teach people how to be counter-terrorists, terrorists around the world are teaching people how to be terrorists. And therefore, they get better at what they're doing the longer they exist. They not only get better, but they get more lethal, because the frustration to achieve the goals in early terrorist acts leads them to become more desperate and do larger scale terrorist activities.
Unable to achieve their unrealistic goals by conventional means, terrorists attempt to send an ideological or religious message by terrorizing the general public. Through the choice of their targets, which are often symbolic or representative of the targeted nation, terrorists attempt to create a high-profile impact on the public of their targeted enemy or enemies with their act of violence. In doing so, they hope to demonstrate various points, such as that the targeted government cannot protect its own citizens, or that by assassinating a specific victim, they can teach the general public a lesson about espousing viewpoints or policies other than their own.
Terrorism exists and has existed through the ages as a tool for people who have no other way to make themselves heard. They perhaps don't believe in the government, or they have no other voice. A ballot box doesn't work for them. They don't have the strength to fight through force of arms against a larger dominant government, or a dominant race perhaps, if it's an ethnic conflict. So they choose terrorism as a way to make themselves heard, to make their cause heard.
At this point, let's look in more detail at the kind of activity you might observe that could be indicators of a terrorist plan. What kind of things do they do? The first step for a terrorist organization to become viable is to increase its size. They do this by holding rallies, posting recruitment flyers, guiding visitors to their websites, and so on. Be on the lookout for suspicious documents that you find on your site. But keep in mind that freedom of speech and expression is guaranteed by the Constitution.
Fundraising is obviously very important in the terrorist realm. They need money, just like every other criminal entity does. They use the internet quite a bit for fundraising, as well as obtaining funds from governments that are sympathetic to their cause. What we're seeing locally is the trafficking of narcotics, pseudoephedrine, as well as other drugs that are used for profits obtained from the sales are used to fund terrorist organizations in the Middle East, as well as other countries abroad.
Another key step for terrorists is to get money. The easiest way to get money is to steal it. There is no record. ID theft, for example, is on the increase, and using another person's identification is an easy way to illegally obtain cash or merchandise that can be converted into cash. Property that is stolen can also be sold to generate cash. Terrorists frequently commit armed robberies to get quick cash. Naturally, all of these are serious crimes for whatever reason they are committed. If your site handles financial transactions in any way, keep in mind the purposes to which the money can be put. Also, if your site experiences the theft of uniforms, vehicles with company logos, etc., such kinds of activities should arouse your suspicions and be reported. The types of weapons that a terrorist can use are introduced in detail in the next chapter. But at this point, let's list the three main kinds. Conventional weapons such as guns, explosives, and incendiary devices. Chemical and biological agents. Nuclear weapons and radiological material. Here is what you should be on the lookout for. You are looking at various blasting caps to set off an explosion. If you see anything like this at your site, let someone know immediately. This image shows how a small homemade pipe bomb, such as the one in the top left-hand corner, can cause a major detonation. Pipe bombs come in different sizes, but all can easily be carried on a person. Here you can see the components of a homemade bomb in a backpack. All the components are legal and easily obtainable. The devastation caused by mass destruction weapons such as explosives can be enormous, as several incidents both in the United States and other countries have shown. Chemical agents are highly toxic, but are used less often because their effect is hard to limit. The best way of preventing their use is to stop theft of chemicals from your site. The potential users have to get into your site to steal this material, and that's where your important position comes into play. Biological agents cause illness and death. Anthrax is probably the best known of these, but any kind of easily infectious disease-causing agent can also spread terror. In addition, the terrorist needs a way to deliver the poisonous substance in the place they want to attack. One simple and effective way is to place the biological agent into the air conditioning or heating system. Nuclear weapons are extremely hard to come by. One possibility is for the terrorist to combine a traditional explosive device with radioactive material, the so-called dirty bomb. Your most important role is to prevent access to, transportation of, or removal of potentially dangerous materials. Once they have chosen a weapon type, the terrorist wants to choose a date of attack. Previously, we have mentioned dates important to our country, such as Independence Day. We should also be aware of other symbolic dates, such as those related to a given religion or dates that correspond to large groups of people being assembled in one area, such as Super Bowl Sunday. Being aware of dates important to different groups and being extra vigilant in the period leading up to such days is crucial. At this point, the terrorist needs to check out the site to assess weaknesses, human and physical, and to conduct dry runs. What should you pay attention to in order to stop them? The idea is to become aware of actions that just don't fit the location and situation. For example, is someone coming closer to a sensitive area than he or she has any valid reason to be? Does she stay in one place for a much longer time than the view deserves? Have you had several such small incidents lately? All those add up to suspicions. In addition, if you find forgotten cameras or equipment in places where there's nothing of tourist interest to photograph, maps, drawings, and cryptic notes would also be something you should report. Finally, anyone asking you questions related to security, such as inquiring about the patrol times of a guard at a power plant, the number of people at the facility, the air conditioning systems, or locations of emergency exits, should be documented and reported. Trying to move a weapon to the target is a terrorist's next challenge. Be on the lookout for nervous behavior or odd clothing for the environment, such as being heavily dressed in the 100-degree heat of summer. Should the weapon be brought in a vehicle, pay attention to large containers and vehicles that appear to be overloaded. Similarly, drivers or operators of any kind of vehicle, including private planes and boats, who do not have current valid operator's licenses should be noted and reported. Also be aware of parked or disabled vehicles in unusual places. Unless this is a suicide operation, the terrorist now needs to escape. The same indicators that made you suspicious of people arriving should cause you to think twice at the time they are trying to leave. They may have less to carry, but they may be more nervous and have a greater sense of urgency. However, if it is a suicide operation, the terrorist does not wish to escape. In the past, we thought we could describe fairly accurately the characteristics of a potential suicide bomber, but this is no longer the case. There is no real profile. Suicide bombs can be delivered by multiple means, such as vehicle bombs, boat bombs, airplanes used as weapons as we saw on September 11th, and a person with an explosive strapped to his or her body. Given that the terrorist does not want to escape, the pre-incident indicators are essentially the same as for non-suicide operations, with the possible extra stress of the knowledge of death leading to hesitancy, nervousness, or extra bulky clothing to conceal a device. All in all, the primary skill for you to develop is a sense for what doesn't fit in. Take a look at the scenario that follows, in which a police officer who makes a routine traffic stop decides that something doesn't seem right.
These terrorist groups or extremist groups may attempt to obtain access to secure areas or secure environments to conduct their next operation. One of the ways they're going to do that is by wearing uniforms, wearing badges, or carrying credentials that allow them to infiltrate these secure areas and gain access to areas they normally wouldn't have access to, so they can blend in with their environment. These are things that we need to look for when we're out in the field. Uniforms, badges, contraband, anything that would allow them to gain access into areas they normally wouldn't have access to. That next vehicle stop, where a person or group is in possession of these items may be stolen, they may be lawfully obtained, but that may be the next stop to taking that piece out of the puzzle to the next terrorist act. So keep your eyes and ears open, report any suspicious activity to your TLO officer.
Good afternoon.
Hi.
I stopped you for failing to yield to a pedestrian.
Oh, I didn't even see him. I'm sorry.
Okay, do you have your driver's license and registration with you?
Yes.
Can I see those, please?
License.
Is this your correct address on your license, ma'am?
Yes.
Is this car registered to you?
Yes, it is.
What year is it?
It's 72, I think.
Okay. Who do all these uniforms belong to?
I don't know.
Where are you taking them to?
I don't know. Wherever I'm told to.
Wherever who tells you?
My employer.
Wherever your employer tells you to take them? Who do you work for?
I work for dry cleaners.
You work for a dry cleaners?
Yes.
What's the name of the dry cleaners that you work for?
It's a place around the corner, the 1 hour cleaners.
1 hour cleaners?
Yes.
Okay, just wait here. I'll be right back, okay?
Okay.
What's going on?
What's good? What you got?
The driver's got an outstanding warrant, but something's just not right. She has a whole bunch of police uniforms in the car, and when I asked her about where she was going, she didn't know. She said she didn't know where she was going. I asked them who the uniforms belonged to. She said she didn't know. And when I asked her who she worked for, she was real hesitant, real nervous, and she told me she worked for a dry cleaners just around the corner.
Good.
But for right now, I just want to arrest her for the warrant and transport her to the station.
Good deal.
All right.
Watch your hip.
You know, something's just not right about all those police uniforms that she's got in that car, and where she says she's going, and who she says the uniforms belong to, and who she says she works for. It's just not right.
Did you notice those extremist stickers also?
Yeah, you know, I did notice those. I think between all those uniforms in the car and her story and those extremist stickers, I think I'm going to notify Detective Tomasi, our TLO, see if he can respond out here, make him aware of the situation.
Good deal.
Motor 8 River City, can you contact Detective Tomasi and advise him to respond to my location, please?
Unit Motor 8, 10-4.
In this scenario, you saw the potential theft of police uniforms. Keep in mind, however, that other credentials are targets for theft, such as ID badges, key cards, and so on.